The Indianapolis Colts traded for Matt Ryan. The Falcons got back a 3rd-round pick for him. And Matt Ryan said in his presser that this is where I wanted to be. I wanted to be on the Indianapolis Colts. And he thought it was the perfect situation to be in. And I want to give my take on this first. Because the question for this topic is, how much better will Matt Ryan make the Indianapolis Colts? And I'm not sure about Drew, because Drew is very wishy-washy, right? There are some
consistent there is.
There are some shows where he's like, I've never disrespected Matt Ryan, and then he comes and spews Matt Ryan hate.
I've never done that a day in my life, other than the fact that he blew a 28-3 lead that I have to disrespect him for.
But I don't want to talk about you here.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're the biggest hater, Mr. Joel Dehls.
You're pretty low on Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan, excuse me.
The hate that you've given Matt Ryan has been utterly disgusting. That when I leave my house in the morning and I think about it, I spit on the floor.
I almost just spit up on the table.
Whenever you talk bad about Matt Ryan, I'm surprised it doesn't leave a bad taste in your mouth. Because it smells disgusting. The disrespect you give to Matt Ryan. You call Jalen Hurts better. Jalen Hurts can't even throw a consistent 15-yard out, and he's better. Listen, Matt Ryan to the Indianapolis Colts was the perfect situation for him. I've been saying it. He's underrated. He is still a great quarterback. The same place that we rank the same places that we rank the Derek Carrs, the Dak Prescotts, the Kirk Cousins. Matt Ryan is right up there, and I think Matt Ryan is a step above. If he's put in the right situation, he can do exactly what Matt Stafford did with the Rams. But the Colts roster isn't the Rams roster.
Thank you.
So I don't know if the Colts will be able to do that.
Stafford's better than Matt Ryan, bro. Stafford's a more talented quarterback.
So easy.
Maybe 5 years ago, Matt Ryan, but this 36,
what do you mean,
37-year-old.
5 years ago? What do you mean? In 2018, threw for 35 touchdowns.
2018 was 4 years ago.
Respect
it's 2022.
You said 5 years ago.
Sorry, 4 years ago.
Okay.
My apologies.
Come on,
Okay,
stop
my
it.
apologies.
3
Stop
years ago,
it.
he threw for 26 touchdowns. Look, this is what I have to say.
That's mid.
26. That's what Wentz just did.
Stafford threw for 41 touchdowns this year.
Wentz threw 26 touchdowns. Or 27.
He has great weapons. Give Matt Ryan that offense. He's throwing 40
Julio
touchdowns.
Jones.
How many touchdowns did Wentz throw for last year?
26 touchdowns.
Okay.
27. 27 and 7.
Whatever.
One more than
Okay.
Matt Ryan. Cool.
Okay.
Go on,
Let me keep on going.
please.
There's a difference. There's a difference between the stat watchers and the tape watchers.
Oh, snap.
And I like to think I grind up tape. Because of that, I've felt bad for Matt Ryan for a long time. In an awful situation. The truth about Matt Ryan is that he almost threw for 4,000 yards last season with no weapons. So close. So close. Almost threw for 4,000 yards. He's missed one game in the last 3 seasons. One of the more durable quarterbacks this game has to offer. He has the most 4,000-yard passing seasons since 2011 with 10. Tied with Tom Brady, who's the greatest of all time, undisputedly. In terms of being clutch, the Colts' problem last year was that Carson Wentz was horrible in the second half, was horrible in the fourth quarter. Matt Ryan has 33 fourth-quarter comebacks, which is third amongst active quarterbacks in the NFL currently, top 10 all-time. That's who Matty Ice is. He is going to be clutch. And
he's behind
Matthew Stafford, he's clutch. He's a clutch demon. He's a clutch demon.
You question him.
Maybe I do.
Okay.
He's clutch, though.
When are you going to give that up?
I don't know.
All right.
The knock I see on Matt Ryan, and sure, Matt Ryan's not as good as he once was in his prime, but he's still a great quarterback. In his prime, he was elite. Now he's great. He's not elite. He's great. He's lost some of that arm strength, but
Definitely.
This past season, the season that everybody likes to say that he's washed in, he was top 3 in most accurate quarterbacks on 10-plus yard throws with Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert.
10+ yards.
Among 30 quarterbacks with at least 50 attempts of 15-plus air yards in 2021, Matt Ryan ranked 20th in completion percentage. And I know that sounds bad, right? But he ranked 5th in on-target percentage and 2nd in catchable percentage. Nice. So it was mostly due to his receivers not being able to haul in those deep balls, and it was Matt Ryan's deficiencies as a deep ball thrower. He's number 3 in deep ball completion percentage. He's number 4 in pressure completion percentage. You talk about the Colts offensive line, pass blocking wise, isn't that great. It doesn't matter.
It's one of the worst.
Because Matt Ryan thrives under pressure, baby. He's going to sling that thing and sling it to Michael Pittman down the field, complete it all day.
Who else outside of Pittman?
That's who Matty Ice is. Matty Ice is a warrior. He's a soldier. He's a gamer.
Can I get
he
that
has
answer?
ice in his veins. He's one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. He's going to show it. He's going to show it this upcoming season. And maybe the Colts don't get another weapon. I feel like they will for sure. Matt Ryan's record when he has a player rush for 100 yards or more is 37-6. That's an absurd winning percentage. That's absurd.
When his running back rushes for over 100, 33-6?
37-6.
37-6.
And do we have any doubts about JT rushing for 100+ yards every single given week? We don't have any questions about that. He's going to have an elite running back. He's going to have a great defense. The Colts had the most Pro Bowlers in 2021 with 7. And since 2018, Matt Ryan has had a bottom 20 defense in 3 of his last 4 seasons. And the one season they weren't bottom 20, they were ranked 19th. Wow, such a big difference. For the past 5 years, he's had no offensive line, no running game, no defense. He's had the weapon, sure, but everything else he hasn't had. And he's still managed to have great seasons. And the numbers may not pop out at you. This is not my first rodeo. This is not the first time I've gone through this, because I remember back in 2019, Phillip Rivers threw 23 touchdowns and had 20 picks. I told Riv, Phillip Rivers still has gas in the tank. He went to the Colts. He led them to the playoffs. He had a great year in 2020.
They lost round 1.
They lost round 1. It was a close game. It was the Buffalo Bills. Buffalo Bills were a great team. The Indianapolis Colts are winning the AFC South. There's no doubt about it. Matt Ryan is the best quarterback in that division by far, and he's going to prove to you and to everybody who doubts Matt Ryan that he's still a great quarterback, and I can't wait to see the goofy look on your face when he does.
Quick question before I get into mine. Are they getting out of the first round of the playoffs?
Matty Ice, anything is possible.
Are they making the playoffs?
They're making the playoffs for sure.
Over who?
They're winning their division.
They have to win the division. They have to.
You think they're not winning over the Giants?
No.
All right.
Respectfully, no.
It's going to be close. But that's what I'm most curious about, if you think they could get out of the first round of the playoffs. Because, I mean, sure, Wentz
I think they can.
Fell apart the second half of the year, but if he's historically bad, they're in the playoffs too. What you're expecting from Matt Ryan?
Yeah, they'll definitely be in the playoffs.
Okay. Here's my issue with Matt Ryan. And I made a video about it. Shout out to Joel Stakes if you want to go watch a 10 to 15 minute video of really my take on this Matt Ryan trade, because I don't completely disagree with you. I think Matt Ryan's an upgrade from Carson Wentz. I don't think in terms of intangibles, leadership, I think without a doubt he's having an upgrade over Carson Wentz statistically. I can make the argument that this past year Carson Wentz was better than Matt Ryan, and you're right though.
Raw
Carson
statistics.
Raw statistics, yes, but if you want to look at the the second half stats in fourth quarter, 100%. Carson Wentz fell apart in second half of games. But my biggest issue with this Matt Ryan trade, it doesn't do anything. Matt Ryan and Carson Wentz, sure, he's an upgrade. It's marginal. It's not a huge. You're not going from Baker Mayfield to Deshaun. You're not going from Teddy Bridgewater, Drew Lock to Russell Wilson. You are getting a marginal upgrade from Carson Wentz to Matt Ryan. And this is where two of my football philosophies kind of clash heads here. Marginal, because on one end, I'm a firm believer. If you could upgrade a quarterback, do it. Whatever it is. And for this, it was a 3rd round pick. But my other philosophy is, if you just have a whatever guy, if you're barely going to make the playoffs, if you're going to get eliminated in round 1, what's the point of getting an aging quarterback, because you're not going to do anything? And that's not Matt Ryan's fault. if you look at the AFC, the quarterbacks are stacked. We have probably the most talented the AFC has ever been. We have arguably the most talented division in the AFC West that we've ever seen, with possibly all 4 teams making the playoffs. We have 3 teams in the AFC North who are all projecting to make the playoffs. And the AFC South, they're getting a little lucky because they're clearly the worst division in the AFC and up there with the NFC South in terms of worst division in football. But yes, statistically, I don't think it's much of an upgrade. I think when we look at the end of this 2022 season and we compare it to Wentz's 2021 season, it's going to be about the same. In this past season, Wentz had 7 more touchdowns. He had less interceptions, less turnover-worthy plays, and I understand that maybe Matt Ryan didn't have as much to work with. But you look at Indy. Does he have that much more in Indy? They have the 30th best pass blocking line. You have Michael Pittman. Is Michael Pittman going to be that much better than year 2 Kyle Pitts? I personally don't think so. Pitts just had 1,000 yards in his rookie season. There's only one other tight end in NFL history to do that. I even think with Marcus Mariota, he's going to compete with Michael Pittman in terms of yards and touchdowns. And I know Matt Ryan has this issue with throwing touchdowns because Julio couldn't catch any touchdowns. And Kyle Pitts, who's 6'6", runs a 4.5, a crazy vertical, only had 1 touchdown. It still blows my mind how that's able to happen. And Matt Ryan, while he only has a $24 million cap hit this season, they can get out of it next season if they do say, you know what, we screwed up. Matt Ryan's not the guy. It's obvious. You know, he's a 36, turning 37-year-old quarterback. We're in a crazy tough conference in the AFC. So while it's a marginal upgrade, to me, it doesn't move the needle. The Colts are going to be fighting for the division with the Titans. Maybe they get lucky. Maybe they get lucky and they win the division, first-round exit. If they don't win the division, they're missing the playoffs. So what was the point of the whole trade?
Maybe they get lucky.
Maybe they get lucky.
Did you just tell me that the Colts isn't a significant upgrade over the Atlanta Falcons situation?
I'm saying offensively. JT, sure, but pass catchers.
What do you mean JT, sure? He's the second best running back in the NFL.
Okay, and he was last year, and they missed the playoffs. Derrick Henry's the best running back in football. They were first round, or they lost their first game. Nick Chubb won the best rushers in football. The Browns missed the playoffs. Running back's important, but look at the NFL. It's not that important. Cam Akers was terrible in the playoffs. Joe Mixon didn't do much in the Super Bowl.
Let's try to actually use context in those situations. Nick Chubb was hurt throughout the year, and the entire
it wasn't his fault that the
entire Browns roster as a whole was hurt. Baker Mayfield torn labrum week 2.
We could go through the top 10 running backs and tell me which of those teams have made significant moves in the playoffs.
And also, let me also say this. You also brought up Jonathan Taylor and the Colts missing the playoffs. Well, it's because the guy that left, Carson Wentz, who Matt Ryan's replacing, collapsed at the end of the year.
He did.
That's why. That's why. They weren't supposed to. You two were the same guys. I'm gonna leave Drew out of this because he doesn't deserve this slander right now.
Thank you.
But you were talking about the Colts being dark horse contenders in the AFC, in large part to Jonathan Taylor and what he was doing.
Remind me.
You were the one that was like, JT MVP. He should be in the conversation.
Real quick, before you go on, last season, did the Raiders have Chandler Jones and Devontae Adams? Did the Broncos have Russell Wilson? Did the Browns have Deshaun Watson? Did the Dolphins just get Tyreek Hill? You think Teron Armstead?
You think if the Colts matched up with the Raiders in the playoffs, they couldn't beat them?
The Raiders? I would take the Raiders.
Absolutely not. I'm leaning.
If you take the Raiders, I don't mind it. Like, it's whatever.
They have a better quarterback. They have better weapons.
This is a hypothetical matchup.
A better defense, but
the Raiders' run defense was one of the worst in the NFL last year. They didn't do anything this offseason to get better in that area at all.
And look at the first round of the playoffs. They had a great game against the Bengals, and Joe Mixon was on clamps.
Well, okay, because the Bengals' offensive line, they don't have a good offensive line at all. And as much as you want to talk about the Colts' pass-blocking offensive line, the two biggest liabilities in pass blocking last year were Eric Fisher, who was coming off an injury, and Mark Glowinski. They got rid of both of them. That pass blocking offensive line was worse in large part to Carson Wentz holding the ball and trying to make a hero play all the time, for the most part.
But who did they have come in and replace left tackle, right tackle? No one yet?
No one yet. But they're still. You're right. It is concerning, but they still have time.
And they had money. They could have easily made a play for Teron.
And they don't have a first-round pick or a third-round pick.
For you to act like, even if you just say, oh, it's just Jonathan Taylor, I mean, yeah, it's one of the...
Jonathan Taylor... I could think Jonathan Taylor is one of the best running backs in football and still realize that just because you're a great running team doesn't mean you're going to have success in the playoffs.
So do you want me to name you these 10 running backs?
Yeah, please.
But it's also... They have one of the best offensive lines. You talk about pass blocking, okay. The ranking in totality was a top 15 unit in football. So Matt Ryan's going
top
from
15 run blocking offensive line. I'm supposed to be blown away by that.
No, they were a top 5 run blocking offensive line. I'm talking
what are you
about
saying,
in
top 15?
totality, they
Okay.
were a top 15 offensive line unit. So Matt Ryan's going from one of the worst offensive lines to one of the better ones.
In terms of
and
running,
he's going to
run blocking.
he's going to a situation where they actually have one of the best running backs in the NFL.
See, but-
that's a significant upgrade.
But running the ball, you love to talk shit about these Ravens teams when they went 14-2 and they have these great rosters and they have the best rushing attack and they didn't do anything.
what did I talk? With
And
the
not
Ravens,
today's episode, but in almost every episode, it's the Ravens. You love to bring up how Lamar has struggled in the playoffs. He has this stacked roster, and all of these teams are great rushing teams. They struggle in the playoffs. Just because you have a good running back, and Jonathan Taylor is all world, he could be the best running back in football next season. That doesn't mean you're going to have success in the playoffs.
The playoffs are all about matchups. The Raiders and the Colts, that is not a good matchup for the Raiders because they don't have a good run defense. They have one of the worst run defenses
I
in the
understand.
NFL.
That point is fair.
We look at the Titans. They can definitely beat the Titans. The Titans don't have a secondary to speak of right now. You also look at the AFC West with the Chiefs and how they look now defensively. Their defense is vulnerable. That's a matchup that could favor the
You're taking
Colts.
the Chiefs over the Colts over the Chiefs.
It's a favorable matchup.
You're taking the Colts
right
over the
now,
Chiefs.
I mean, right now we're a year away from any of this happening.
You're
but
taking the Colts over
it's-
the Chiefs.
It's all about matchups in the playoffs.
Tell me if they
that's
matched up.
It's
Colts
all
or
about
the Chiefs.
It's all about matchups in the playoffs. And for example, if
Why are you avoiding the question?
because I don't feel like it's necessary for me to answer it to make my point.
Because
right
you know
now.
it'd be ridiculous to say that the Colts could actually beat the Chiefs,
And
even
in
with the
and
whole
in the
matchup
AFC
thing.
North, if you want to pick the Ravens to win that division, Colts versus the Ravens, that favors the Colts. That matchup favors the Colts too. So I'm saying
And the Bengals, the
Colts,
Browns.
Yeah, I think the Bengals. That's a much more even thing too.
And the Browns?
The Browns, Deshaun, you know how I feel about the Browns.
understand.
But for you to act like the Colts are this marginally better team
They
with
are
Matt
marginally
Ryan
better.
is ridiculous.
But can we be
They're
real?
not.
They
They're
just-
significantly better.
And who is
'Cause
their
of other
second,
moves they made.
Who
What
is
they-
their second option
They're
on the
going
outside?
from what the 18th or 19th best quarterback to the 15th or 14th best quarterback.
You got to understand, Matt Ryan is the 15th, 14th best quarterback under that situation that he was in, the horrible situation he was in.
You think he's going to crack the top 10, bro? Like
He
you
can
think-
have a top 10 season. He can definitely have a top 10 season in Indy.
But how?
For sure.
With no number 2 option. Unless you're saying, which is fair. Matt Ryan does dump off to the running back more than Carson Wentz does. My whole point being is Paris Campbell being my number 2 making me
Screwed.
look at this Colts offense and thinking Matt Ryan, I'm plugging in, they're automatically a playoff team? I can't do that.
They're
His
automatically
biggest-
a playoff team with Matt Ryan.
I
There's no
can't-
doubt about it.
I can't say
There's
that.
no doubt about it. They're automatically a playoff team with Matt
listen,
Ryan.
and the only reason you can say that so confidently is because the AFC South is right now at least in question. And even still, to have them over Tennessee, who was just the number 1 seed, when week in, week out,
Just
and
got
I'll say
Robert Woods
we,
too.
because all of us were here collectively doubting Tennessee, and week in, week out, they constantly kept winning. With injuries, any type of adversity, they kept riding through it. We have to give credit to Mike Vrabel. We have to give credit to everything that defense did last year, regardless of what we may think about it. They kept winning. We can't just project right now the Colts, who just added Matt Ryan with still no addressing the left tackle, no addressing the right tackle.
And the Colts also lost their DC.
and no addressing
So that
the
great-
number 2 option on their team. How can I look at the Colts right now and project them to be over the Titans?
And losing Eberflus too. We talk about how losing Flores is going to hurt so much, but the same thing, that their defense has been great the last few seasons.
The Colts have more talent defensively than the Dolphins. That's the difference.
And
You have-
secondary-wise, let's be
you have-
real. Are the Colts a good secondary right now?
Just
right
traded
now,
Rocky Sin.
right now they
Kenny Moore is solid, but outside of that, that is their only talent.
right now they have a great nickel and Kenny Moore. That's about it. But you look at the Colts front 7: Grover Stewart,
They
DeForest
have a good
Buckner,
front seven.
Yannick Ngakoue. They just got him
Darius
Kwity
Leonard.
Paye, who was really good as a rookie.
We agree that Yannick Ngakoue is not good. You
As a
said that
pass
multiple
rusher,
times.
he's really good.
He was
As a
solid
pass
last
rusher, he's
season
really
with the
good.
Raiders.
Last week we said you just agreed that Yannick Ngakoue is not a great player.
He's not a great player, but he's a great pass rusher all around. He's not a great player though. He's a great pass rusher.
Okay, I'll
though.
let you have it.
Darius Leonard's one of the better linebackers
Yes,
in the
for
NFL.
sure.
He was amazing.
They still have holes on this team. There's no doubt about it. But you mentioned the Titans. The Colts weren't far off from the Titans. It took the Colts collapsing at the end of the year, plus the Titans beating them 2 times last year, for them to ultimately secure the division. Both games, may I add, that Carson Wentz folded. One of them where he just threw a pass to the defender, which was a pick 6 versus the Titans.
That's the first game or the second game? Second
think
game I
it was
remember
the
was being
first
really
game.
close.
The second game was closer. The first game, Carson Wentz was boneheaded in
Listen,
it.
the Colts last year went 9-8. I think this Colts team is probably going to go 10-7, and if they go to the playoffs, they'll lose in the first round. That's why I think it's marginally better, because if your big thing is he got Jonathan Taylor, who's a great running back, we've seen year after year, just because you have a great running game, that doesn't always translate to wins.
Well, if you think
playoff wins, rather.
That's your projection for the Colts. And if you think the Colts are going to lose in the first round, then so be it. Like that's your opinion. But I'd rather my team gets to the playoffs and we'll see what happens.
That's the thing. I don't even know if they will, though.
They'll get to the playoffs for sure.
Which is fair. You can have that opinion. No, I don't doubt.
I think guaranteed. I just guarantee
is nuts.
Guarantee they'll make the playoffs.
Are they better than the Dolphins?
It's really close.
Now, to your point about the top 10 rushers.
And between Matt Ryan and Tua, I'm going with Matt Ryan.
Nah, we'll see. I disagree, but I understand. Matt Ryan has a laundry list of seasons to back up that claim, so it's fair. Jonathan Taylor didn't make the playoffs. Nick Chubb didn't make the playoffs. Joe Mixon made the playoffs, was underwhelming. Najee Harris made the playoffs, first-round exit. Dalvin Cook missed the playoffs. Antonio Gibson missed the playoffs. Ezekiel Elliott played for the Cowboys, first-round exit. First-round exit. Elijah Mitchell, Super Bowl. Yep. Derrick Henry, he
made the playoffs,
lost in the first round, but yes, you're 100% right. And Damian Harris, first-round exit.
Sick.
What was that proving that running backs are...
I'm just saying, because your biggest thing was when I said, cool, they got Jonathan Taylor, it did come off a bit disrespectful because JT's phenomenal, but in terms of having impacts and in the playoffs and carrying you to a Super Bowl, that doesn't happen.
That's not my point, though. Like, you made that your point to try to back up the claim that JT and going from Atlanta to Indy is not this big thing.
Offense, in terms of
I never said
weapons, it's really
correct me if I'm
huge.
wrong, Drew, but did I ever say JT is going to lead you to a Super Bowl? Did I ever say he's going to lead you to multiple playoff wins? I just said
he's going to play a huge role.
I just said for you to act like him going from Atlanta to Indianapolis is not a significantly better situation is just wrong.
He's upgrading significantly on defense.
The claim,
even offensively,
one of the arguments you said was 37-6 when running backs rush for over 100. So then when you obviously bring in Jonathan Taylor, who is the second best running back in football, I can understand where someone may perceive that as you're saying, if you're giving him the number 2 running back in football,
90% winning percentage,
why can't?
Yeah, I'm saying
14-3.
Matt Ryan, when he has a running back who's actually good, because he's never had a running game outside of those Shanahan years and those early years in Atlanta. He's won games. He's at a great pace. Like it barely loses.
So, question: is this team better or worse than last year?
It's significantly better.
But how?
Because of Matt Ryan.
So just
they went from the 19th best quarterback to the 15th best quarterback.
Outside of Matt Ryan, is there anything different?
They lost their left tackle. They lost
Yannick Ngakoue coming in.
So outside of Matt Ryan, they got worse.
I don't think so. I don't think losing Eric Fisher is getting worse. He was one of the worst tackles in pass pro.
Fair.
And Glowinski, he can go.
But that's my fear.
They haven't replaced him.
And you don't have the number 2.
They haven't replaced him. This is why I don't want to get into this talk just yet, because the draft is a month away.
Sure.
I don't know what's going to happen.
Unless they
don't have a first-round pick.
Unless they make a splash, like the Tyreek Hill type of splash, this team, their absolute upside is first-round exit.
The Chiefs last year, going into they got Joe Tooney, yes, and they traded for Orlando Brown. But what solidified the interior of the offensive line was drafting Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith. That obviously is an anomaly situation, but this draft has a lot of depth. And Indianapolis,
they don't have a lot of picks, though.
Indianapolis, with those picks, with the picks they do have, can get significant upgrades.
They did get
there are still
2/3.
There are still players out there in free agency that they could target. They could get. I think the biggest reason why we weren't seeing Indy make moves and being aggressive is because they didn't have a quarterback yet. They had to wait for them to get a quarterback. How dumb would it be for the Colts to splurge on free agency, not have a quarterback, then wouldn't be able to trade for a Matt Ryan because they have no cap space to trade for?
They wouldn't be.
Now they have the quarterback. So now we're going to see them fill out the roster around him with the cap space remaining.
The Colts, who won 9 games last year, a game out of the playoffs, we're expecting them. I think it's a marginal upgrade, and I think that matters. So I do think they'll win 10 games, and maybe they win the division.